So I'm going to talk generally about these targets. I'm also going to talk about how we integrate ecosystem functions, ecosystem services and viability, and like all good professors in universities, I do as little as possible, and everybody else does lots of work, and they're all people do the work, and every idea I have, I just stole from them. Okay, let's talk about the facts. Jonathan gave a great introduction. He talked about how long we'd been thinking about these targets and how much was enough, how much does nature need. Actually, it goes back to the 1950s or 60s. The first people who asked this question were the population geneticists, and they came up with some fairly silly answers like 50, I think, to maintain genetic variability, and then we had other equally silly answers like 500 and 5,000. I've been working on this question for a long time, done a lot of population viability analysis, so what does nature need? I'll tell you in a second what the answer is. I'll tell you exactly what the answer is, and there is no other answer. Okay, you ready? The first thing is, what does the science say? Do a population viability analysis, and if you increase the amount of habitat for the species, its viability will go up. That's a fact. If you improve its management, it will go up. If you improve connectivity, the viability of that population will go up. What does a species area curve do? As more area is conserved, it goes up. So basically all the data we have, and Brendan mentioned this in the morning, all the data we have says there are no thresholds. Everything goes up. Probably the classic paper in this field by Henrik Andren, 1994, fragmentation paper. 30%, you're in a bit of a mess, but if you have more habitat, there will be more species. So there is no threshold. You know, there's maybe the curve just does this, or from your perspective, just does that. That's it. And maybe there's a bit of a wiggle, but it's always going up. So what does nature need? More. That's the answer. Nature needs more. There is one answer. That's the punchline. And then the question is, but when will we know if I have enough? So if I just say more, when do I stop? When the extinction rate isn't 1,000 times the background rate. When ecosystem services aren't in continuous decline. When the planet stops falling to pieces, then we can stop doing conservation and we can stop building the reserve system, we can stop managing it properly. When that happens, that's it. All these targets are just giving us something to go for, but they're not endpoints. We'll know when we've got there. We'll know when we can't walk down the street because there's so many frigging koalas, we have to kick them out of the way. And somebody says, I want to make koala coats. When there's so many whales in the sea, we start thinking, yummy, yummy, let's start eating them again. When the bird song in the forest is so loud that we say, enough of this, too many birds. Okay, that's when we know we have enough. It's very, very simple. Anybody attempting to justify any other number for nature is wrong. So the only other viable number is maybe 100%. Bottom line, we're not going to get 100%, so we just keep going up, and then when extinction rates fall to background levels, when ecosystem services stop declining, then maybe we think about stopping. Very, very simple, not very complicated. So let's talk about ecosystem services and planning and all those other things that we're going to talk about in triple bottom line, and just think about some of the things we've heard. And I think the triple bottom line argument, Jonathan mentioned it nicely today, and they all talked about it. Generally, that's how societies run: the economy, the society, and nature. There's three things we want. Well, I've just shown that basically we can't be sure nature's happy until it gets 100%. The people want 50%. Okay, so what about ecosystem services? What about the economy? What does the economy want? There are very few good numbers about how much we should maintain ecosystem services. Callum Roberts has come up with 30%. Actually, that goes back to a paper that we wrote in 2003. We had a discussion about marine reserves, an NC's working group on marine reserves, Leah Gerber, in an ecological applications paper. I think Callum may have been a co-author. I was a co-author, definitely. It's an 11-year-old concept. It's not a 2-year-old concept. Bottom line is, reviewed all the literature on marine reserves, all the literature on fishing, and we basically found out that a no-take area of around 30% is better for the economy. If you go under 30%, 20 or 30%, if you can't get to 30%, the economy's in a bad way. The economy's in a bad way. So If you think of triple bottom line accounting and you ignore everything other than the economy, then you go for 30% in the sea, no take. And that's what the models say, that's what the data says. That's all about stochasticity, variability, securing livelihoods. That's what we need. Then if you actually think that people matter and their values matter, if you actually think that nature matters, then obviously you've got to trade them off and you've got to go for more than 30%. So what do we need for ecosystem services? All I can say is from a fisheries perspective, from a biomass production perspective, we need at least 30%. But there will be trade-offs. And so let's go to the land and look at a whole heap of other ecosystem services, the ones that, for example, Brendan mentioned, water, carbon, and pollination, all those services. Well, again, you'll get more of them if you go up. There will be trade-offs though. And so this is one of the most crucial areas. We've got to accept that it's not just going to be, when we start building these reserve systems, it's just not a matter of trying to get one of these things. We've got to make trade-offs and we've got to decide some places will be better for carbon, some places will be better for biodiversity. We've shown this time and time again, but those planning things can be done. So let's think a little bit about targets and what we're trying to achieve, and I'll end on these sorts of discussions. These big numbers we don't really like much, personally. This 17% and 10%. Why? Because they ignore some other more important, equally important targets. One is the trade-off issue. Just because you're getting more protected areas, if you've got to make decisions, some of the ones that will improve water quality aren't the ones that will be good for biodiversity. Some of the ones that are good for carbon are not the ones for biodiversity. So we've got to acknowledge them. Therefore we need multiple targets and we have to accept trade-offs. Venter's paper, 2 years ago, science shows those trade-offs between biodiversity and carbon. So in a sense, not about everybody having a target, it's about everybody doing these trade-offs and working out what's best. But there's two other targets we probably should have. One is a representation target and one is a management effectiveness target. So we need to have a number like 17, 20, 25%. All I care about it is bigger than what we have now, because I've proved to you more is better, so the target just has to be more than what we have now. But what we also need is another number for representation. And we've invented that. It's called protection equality. It turns a country's reserve system into a single number between 0 and 1. If all your habitats are equitably protected, you get 100%. If you have a reserve system that's very big and it's almost all desert and nothing else, unless you're Saudi Arabia, you have a very small protection equality. The United States has a poor protection equality. Australia has a reasonable protection equality. The Great Barrier Reef Marine Park is the best protection equality of any reserve system in the entire planet, as an 80% protection equality, because they conserve 33% of the whole area, but at least 20% of every habitat. So read those papers. We can set targets for representation that are independent of total land protected. And we should set those targets. We should not allow countries like the United States, and in the marine areas, Australia has a terrible protection equality outside the Great Barrier Reef. We should not allow people to meet their total area targets with very, very poor representation. And there is a single number and it doesn't, we should report on that. And then, something I know less about, people in this room know more about, we need management effectiveness targets. It's all very well drawing the lines on the map. We need single numbers, like our protection equality number, that actually sets you scores for management effectiveness, and we need to set standards for management effectiveness. That's obvious. There's no point having a park system unless you can prove that it's working. All those things are essential. I will end with this. The solution is that. That's the target. That's how much nature needs. We go on and on and on, achieving these three goals until things get better. Thanks.